what's going on, guys. Kalamazi here. Day 2 of Dragonflight Alpha is in the books, and we did a lot of actual testing today with Evoker, the same as yesterday. But unlike leveling yesterday, I spent about 6-ish hours at the target dummies actually on stream, trying to get a feel for like single target blue builds, frost builds, AOE frost, AOE fire builds, the red blue builds, whatever you want to call them, and a few builds in between. And last night's video, we talked a little bit at the end about like what I've been doing for leveling, a really like just basic overall generic like opener that really didn't have much, I guess, thought behind it. It was 5 in the morning, but I think we actually honed in on some pretty decent openers and like general rotations today. So I want to talk about that today in this video and just go from there. Now, if you guys are looking for more of a general like deep dive on Evoker, I made a video yesterday. I have a link to it at the end of this video if you want to take a look at it on Devastation Evoker. Now, to a similar extent, I have not helped or worked on any of the healing, I forgot what it's called, spec of Evoker, but I know Automatic Jack did and did make a video recently as well covering that. So if you want to look at that, he should have one on his channel also, and I heard it's pretty fun to play and a pretty OP healing spec on its own. And if you guys are new to the channel and like to see more Evoker or Warlock coverage, feel free to smash the sub button below. It helps out a ton. And also while you're down there, smash the like button as well. It really, well, helps out a ton. So with that being said, let's get into the video, starting off with some AOE builds, more of like the red fire-based side initially, and then looking more at the blue, I guess you can call it, I don't know, frost, the blue base side, and then some single target stuff as well. So if you're looking at playing the fire build, or I guess the red build, whatever you want to call it, Evoker and AOE, I will say I actually really enjoy this build. It's fun, it's exciting. It reminds me a little bit of Destro Lock. There's some RNG essences to it. It's not as good as Destro on retail right now, put that aside. But it's actually competitive in AOE if it's sustained AOE and targets live for a long time. So unlike the blue side, you don't have Eternity Surge here, which you can take. There are some hybrid builds, which we might look at here in a little bit. But I am in a full fire build commitment here, right? So Firestorm is a 20-second cooldown. It basically is like a pulsing fire AoE above your target, which drops white hot cinders onto them. There's a chance if you spec into the talent below it being Snapfire, it gives Living Flame a small chance to reset the cooldown of Firestorm and make it deal 40% increased damage and be instant cast. So you have both Firestorm as well as Snapfire working in your favor. You end up actually having this talent here called Everburning Flame, and this is the big one. Pyre and Living Flame extend the duration of your fire breath damage over time by 1 second. Fire breath is going to be your actual only like empowered ability here. You once again don't have Eternity Surge. Now you can take it. There's builds that take both this and this. I'm just not playing that build here. You can play it. It is fine. But I wanted to go more into a fire build with Tyranny and things and see where that went. And the big thing with this build is you're casting your actual firestorms. You're casting, you know, like your fire breath. But as long as you cast enough Living Flames and Pyres, which is not too hard to do, you basically maintain a permanent uptime on the actual Fire Breath dot. And once again, with Heat Wave, Fire Breath deals 40% more damage over time. So that dot is empowered a pretty good bit. It deals 18,000 damage over 16 seconds. But if that dot lasts for half a minute, it does a good bit more damage than that. Now, the upside is like this build's pretty competitive when it comes to like sustained AoE. But the downside is like, if packs are dying in a few seconds, this build's not very competitive. And this build's single target, comparatively to the blue build, which we'll look at in a minute here, is nowhere near as good. But it's cool. So, let's take a look at it. So what I've been doing, as far as my opener is concerned, and this build also is a bit more easier, I'd probably say, compared to the blue build, because the blue build has like mini dump cycles in it for like single target, cryo focus, and all that. Initially, I'm going to open up on a deep breath. I can pre-queue my actual instant cast fire breath here, no big deal. So we're going to open up on a deep breath coming in here right into a fire breath after this, bang, bang, and then I end up dropping an actual firestorm here. Now the big thing, I'll actually end up just popping my Dragon's Rage right here and just literally going into Living Flame, Pyre spam. Living Flame, Pyre spam, because once again, your Living Flames and your Pyres will extend the actual fire breath dot, and that's like the gist of this actual build. There's no like, this is basically it. You get an instant cast actual firestorm here, drop it there, instant cast, bang, you're good to go. One more Living Flame here, and outside of that, you can just use your essences to dump Pyres into. I still have the dot rolling from Fire Breath, for example, but I have another fire breath ready to go. You launch that, there's your actual essence regen coming in. You can dump some pyres here, and for the most part, you're just sort of hoping and praying and fishing for like random Pyrestorm procs. You can cast it here. There's times that it almost procs back to back, and it feels pretty insane, and there's times where it doesn't really proc at all, and it feels pretty subpar, but that's just sort of the RNG of this build. And I mean, once every 2 minutes, you're going to cast your Deep Breath, your Tip the Scales, you're going to end up casting your Dragon's Rage. But for the most part, you can see like my Fire Breath is still active, and I'm casting Fire Breath literally right here again. Also making sure to be relatively low on essences at this point, because I'm going to get my essence regen coming in. There's an actual proc again from Firestorm, and it's really just this Builder Spender, or this Living Flame, just wait to regen essences. Outside of that, cast a Pyre in AoEs. Living Flame, extend Fire Breath. You got a Pyre spell, you got 2 essences, cast it, why not? As a proc, throw it there, throw one more. We got a Firestorm again coming up here. We're running pretty low on essences here. Living Flame, we can do one more Pyre, and there's our Fire Breath. It gives us our 50% increased essence regen, and this is basically it. This is what the build does. You'll see when the actual blue build gets talked about in a minute here, this build is much less complicated. It's a good bit less complicated than the blue build. And I think personally, like visually, it's pretty cool. I don't think there's really many visuals in the game that beat Firestorm, and if you cast the Firestorm and proc one right afterwards, having 2 down looks really cool. The AoE of this build is competitive in sustained AoE settings to the blue build you're going to look at in a minute here. But once again, the blue build does much, much, much better single target than this build. And you can sort of see why. There's really not a whole lot of single target with this build. Living Flame is not really very good. Pyre is an AoE ability. This is an AoE ability with a dot on it. This is an AoE ability. And you don't cast anything else, really. Alright, so when it comes to the blue side of Devastation for Evoker and AoE, it's actually very similar to the single target version of the blue AoE rotation, I suppose. You're sort of just throwing in Pyres for AoE when you're trying to dump essences instead of just, casting Disintegrates. So the big thing to keep in mind here, once again, Disintegrate does indeed still tie into the rotation. Scintillation gives a 6% chance per tick of Disintegration to cast an Eternity Surge at rank 1, which is here, AoE damage. The trait before this gives a 10% damage amp to whatever target you hit with Disintegrate. So that is the main enabler of your Disintegrate, double Azure Strike, charge, blast windows, right? So you have your 10% damage amp here from Disintegrate. Thanks to Focusing Iris. Azure Strike, the actual talent here, I guess this modifier here, if I can pull it up. Whenever you Azure Strike, charge, blast, it gives you a 100% damage increase for 3 seconds. And it stacks 2 times. And so the goal is to technically go Disintegrate into double Azure Strike and then Charge Blast, carrying over the 200% damage amp from Charge Blast and the 10% amp from Disintegrate on your main target. The other cool thing is that thanks to a handful of abilities like Protracted Talons, and you also have Eternity Span here, your Azure Strike hits 6 targets. Your Charge Blast hits 3 thanks to Expansive Maw, and your actual Eternity Surge hits up 8, which is pretty wild. And if you're throwing essences through Pyre, that also cleaves. So the big thing when it comes to whether it's single target or AoE is micromanaging around your power swell, which is given to you by empowered spells, which is either Fire Breath or Eternity Surge, with respect to that. Now the big thing is that, yes, you might not need to charge Eternity Surge to rank 4, because I'm hitting 4 targets, but this ability here, once again, you get 50% increased essence regen rate for 2 seconds per empowered level. So while you might only want to technically charge it to 2 to hit 4 targets total, charging it to 4, hitting 8, even though there's only 4, gives you 4 extra seconds of 50% increased essence regen, which is very big. Essences, more Pyres, more blast, everything else. It's very, very relevant. So both Fire Breath, and Eternity Surge give that buff. So it's important to not overlap that buff and play around that as much as possible. All right, so as far as the actual rotation is concerned, I typically end up opening up on a Deep Breath, which is your 2-minute cooldown, your large, like frontal, AoE, everything in a line kind of ability. You can pre-cast Tip the Scales if you want. It is a permanent buff on you until you cast a spell, and it makes your next empowered spell, being Eternity Surge or Fire Breath, an instant cast. And once again, either of those spells will indeed give you the buff, your power swell, which gives you empowered, or I guess increased regen rate in your essences. So keep that in mind. So the opener we're going to do is a Deep Breath into an instant cast Fire Breath, and then we're going to go into our Disintegrate, double Azure Strike, Charge Blast window, and yeah, just really go from there. So I'll try and call it out while I'm doing it here. I might mess it up a little bit. It's still sort of complicated and sort of fresh, but yeah. So here we go. Going into a deep breath right here, into a fire blast right there. Going into a disintegrate. Double Azure Strike. 1, 2, charge blast. Bam, there you go. Right into an Eternity Surge here. Once again, buff is fallen. There's our 4 stack right there. Pop our actual Dragon's Rage. I'm going to Azure Strike, Pyre. Azure Strike, Pyre. And I'm mainly alternating here until I have my next charge blast window, which is right here. Disintegrate, Strike, Strike, Charge Blast. And back into Pyre. Strike, Pyre, Strike. One more time for the actual buff falls. Pyre, there we go. I can Fire Blast again, Fire Breath again here because my buff is fallen. There's that. Once again, I have a charge blast window coming up, so I'll disintegrate. Double Azure Strike. 1, 2. Just my charge blast. Cast my actual Eternity Surge. The buff is falling again here. There's that. Increase regen once again. Pyre. Pyre. I'm just filling with Azure Strikes if need be. And that's like the actual gist of the build. Now, RNG will come into play a bit, but for the most part, I don't cast Disintegrate unless I'm trying to go into my Charge Blast window. If I have like extra essences laying around, I'm typically dumping it into Pyres, because Pyre is like your main like frontal AoE. It's your main AoE based ability if you're looking for essence spending with this build. Now, once again, if you're looking at like more prio damage, you can Disintegrate a bit more. Your Azure Strike, Double Strike, Charge Blast builds will still bring a lot of prio damage. But once again, like, your Azure Strike hits 6 targets. Your Charge Blast hits 3 targets. This hits 8 targets. Your Disintegrate hits 1, but it's also a very big DPS increase. It's like your main source of single target damage. So it's a lot of funnel damage, and it also empowers your Charge Blast, and you have this insane essence regen coming in from both Fire Breath and weaving in your Eternity Surges, and that's really it. It seems a bit complicated, and it sort of is, but once you get a hang of it, it's actually not that bad. So as we all know, the logs don't lie, and I play perfectly. So these logs are going to indeed be basically gospel for Evokers going forward. Memes aside, I probably scuffed every single rotation in these logs, but I think we're getting closer to a pretty solid one in AoE. If you want to link to my personal logs, there's a link down below in the comment section or something like that. You can find it. Description, comment section, one of the two. So I have a few from earlier we looked at. This was like the initial blue AOE build that we played. Coming in at about 23,816 DPS over a 5.5 minute trial. Second build ended up being about 22.9, about 1,000 DPS less. I tried to prioritize Pyre more in this build. You can sort of see it here. I had 28 Pyre casts in a 5.5 minute sample versus 26 in a 350 sample, right? Now, the big thing here, I sort of devalued, or I didn't cast as many Disintegrates. I basically cast them only in the windows I wanted to cast, well, you know, actual Charge Blast. Maybe a couple more due to, like, you know, user error or whatever. But there's a bit of a difference here. 22 in a minute and a half, a bit of a longer test versus 13. So, like, I shifted towards a bit more of a Pyre AoE-based profile. And I mean, you can look at the crit chance here and the variance between them. There's a bit more crit chance here, but either way, putting up about 23.2, 23.3, I can say, probably averaging them both together over about a 4.5, 5 minute test sample. Now, this is the blue build. Once again, you can see Azure Strike being a pretty big portion of our damage at 31.5, and both being a bit less here, give or take a little bit more. Once again, user error. Charge Blast, Eternity Surge, Fire Breath, Pyre, and you do see a shift a bit here towards more Pyre and Fire Breath in the shorter one here, but one big thing sticks out. Azure Strike is very solid. Instant cast, hit 6 targets. If you're under Dragon's Rage, Azure Strike guarantees you an Essence Burst proc, which is a free Disintegrate, free Pyre, or free Charge Blast, I think. It's very strong, and the damage it puts out is very good in the first place. So I'd say about 23, 4 average damage-wise with the actual Frost build, or the blue build. The Fire build, 23.7. And I believe the first test we ran at about 11:26 at about a PM with about a 450, you know, duration. The second one we ran came in at 24.1. So the AOE you put out can be pretty wild. Look at the actual breakdown here. It is so simple compared to the blue one, right? You've got Azure Strikes, like juggling Disintegrate windows with Charge Blasts and Surges and Double Strikes and buffs and everything else. Dude, the Fire build's like, yeah, I threw some Pyres. I got some Fire Breaths down. Some Living Flame procs were coming out. Some Firestorms. I had a good time. Fire just hits things, and it does damage, and it's fun, and it's good. And you can see that, like, the little spikes in here when we get Dragon's Rage, yeah, coming up again here at about pull 2, right about here too. Deep Breath being a decent bit of our damage. Not a crazy amount, but keep in mind we only had 3 casts over the duration of this fight, and the average hit was about 91k. Not bad, not the best, not the worst, but I mean, you can see here, Pyre making up a massive 39%, basically 40 of our damage, followed by 30 with Fire Breath, 16 with Living Flame, and Firestorm being about 9.3. Being a bit more here, we had about 16 casts over the 4.5 minute poll comparatively to 13 here on the 450. Just random procs. RNG is RNG, right? At times, you're going to end up getting the actual Snapfire procs a bit more often, back to back. And that 40% damage increase with it being instant cast, as you can see, makes a bit of a difference. Once again, Fire build, good in settings where it's sustained, consistent AoE. You want to be able to basically extend your actual Fire Breath dot as long as possible with Ever-Burning Flame, casting Pyres and Living Flames. But if the mobs are dying really fast, Blue, much better, much burstier, much more upfront. You got 5 spells before you're dumping much damage. Fire needs a longer duration to do so. Plus, the single target of Blue is much, much, much better than the single target of Fire. Let's take a brief look at those. All right, so when it comes to the Azure Blue build of single target, or however you want to word it, the Blue build of Evoker in single target, this is the AOE build we just played. The only change here, we're not playing Eternity Span. I can change the profile right here behind my camera. This goes away. I put an extra point in Tyranny. Now, we're not cleaving on multiple targets, so this is a dead talent in single target. You can make a case for changing Continuum to Causality possibly, but more of a sim thing. Now, I did put a second point in Tyranny. I'm going to say right now, Deep Breath, like the frontal AoE that you do, like this cone thing, is actually really underwhelming in single target, and it's a 2-minute cooldown. I'm not sure if it's really even worth casting. That's a sim thing. It very well could be, and it is indeed a part of like the CDR is built in the Tyranny, but I'm more concerned like with the Dragon's Rage cooldown reduction. I don't really care a whole lot about Deep Breath, so I'm going to forego that in the single target now. It very well could be wrong to forego that. If it is, you just precast your Fire Breath like normal, and you just do the actual Deep Breath and then go into the Disintegrate, Double Azure Strike, Charge Blast cycle, which we will look at right here. So, once again, we do have both Eternity Surge and Fire Breath, so I can't really pre-queue my tip scales here because I want to like hard cast the actual Fire Breath in a pre-cast kind of notion, right? So, the big thing, I am going to pre-cast my Fire Breath right here. There is that. It goes off. Bang. Sounds good. Right into a Disintegrate. Disintegrating. I'm going to Double Azure Strike. 1, 2, Charge Blast. Then I Empower. Then I go Eternity Span, whatever it's called. Dragon's Rage. And the big thing here, I am just filling with Disintegrates. Azure Strike, Disintegrate. Azure Strike after this, Disintegrate. There it is again, and this is like your big filler. Now I can go, once again, Double Azure Strike, Charge Blast here, because it came off cooldown again, in that mini dump window. But that's basically it. One more strike before it falls, free Disintegrate here. Now, I will Disintegrate down to less than 6 essences here, because I want to actually Fire Blast and get my big, 50% increase essence regen coming in. But for the most part, like, this is basically it. I'll Disintegrate, Double Azure Strike, Charge Blast, there's that. I'll cast Eternity Surge here from a buff fill, get it back up, there's that, launch that. And the big thing, Disintegrate. That's your main single target spender. It's important to keep in mind and sort of watch the duration on Charge Blast, because when it comes back up, you want to be going into a Disintegrate, back into a Double Azure Strike, and Charge Blast. That is where like the majority of our damage lies in that damage amp. Maintaining the big Disintegrate buff, filling with, not a Pyre, filling with like your Fire Breath to maintain the actual Essence regen buff as well, not capping essences, and casting the Disintegrate as your, really just your main Essence spender of choice. I'll cast this here, once again, a free proc, Double Azure Strike, 1, 2, Charge Blast, cast my Eternity Surge, get my buff back up, there's that, fire that off, Disintegrate, and that's basically it. That is a single target rotation. You're not really mixing in Pyres, because once again, I mean, there's not anything we're cleaving on. So Disintegrate is like your main single target damage-based ability for Evoker. And you have talents, once again, like Focusing Iris, or Focusing Iris, turn to BFA, and Scintillation, that just empower Disintegrate, and just actually empower the spells you cast after Disintegrate as well. And this is one of the things, like, technically you sort of can cast it, in a sense, as Fire, but it's just not empowered as much. You don't have the big Eternity Surge, Double Azure Strike into Charge Blast windows. You just don't have them. Now, there are some hybrid builds, but then you're missing out on either focusing iris or scintillation or both, right? Let's take a look at the fire build briefly in single target we just played, and then we can compare the single target damage. So if you're looking at playing the fire single target build, these talents do differ from what we saw a minute ago in the fire AoE section. I just can't bring myself to play Firestorm and Snapfire in single target. I tried to shift a bit more towards a single target fire based profile just because it's so bad with all this stuff here, but it's still pretty bad. So we're gonna end up playing Engulfing Blaze over Ruby Embers. You can make a case for both. Both work off a Living Flame. We are playing Ever-Burning Flame, 2 points in Tyranny, 1 point in Ruin, and 2 points in Burnout. So Fire Breath reduces the cast time of Living Flame by 8% for 8 seconds. This ability here, for being a ultimate talent, feels very bad. Very undervalued. You could probably make this like 30%, like 15 and 30 as of like rank 1 and rank 2. And it might feel a little better there, but at the same time, I actually don't know. It's just really awkward. It doesn't feel very good. It's very underpowered. There's like some weird synergies or anti-synergies here too. Like, for example, I mean, Pyre is your essence spender at 2 essence, but you still have Disintegrate at 3, which is a very good just overall damage-based ability, right? You still have the actual damage amp here. It's typically, from what I've seen, what I've wanted to spend essence on for the most part. But Pyre also reduces the cooldown of Fire Breath by 3 seconds. But at the same time, you have Ever-Burning Flame, which increases the actual dot. Now, Fire Breath does indeed do initial impact damage. So there's like a weird, like, not anti-synergy there, but like it's sort of an awkward, like, I don't know, just don't really mesh as well together. It's fine. I still want to cast this with the dot up. It's fine if it's still up for whatever reason, but keep in mind we are playing Ever-Burning Flame, which increases the duration of the actual dot from both Pyre and Living Flame cast. Now, once again, there's not a whole lot of experimentation with this build going on because the blue build is just infinitely better in single target, but I tried to piece together an opener and get a decent look at what it might look like, and this is sort of where I landed. So once again, I'm not casting Deep Breath in single target. It might be a gain. It quite possibly might be with Tyranny and things, but it seems very mediocre in single target, and, well, yeah, I'm just not really casting it. So now I can indeed, oh, by the way, there are some builds that do indeed go into Eternity Surge, maybe even like Charge Blast territory and that with like a hybrid, like, purple build for both AoE and single target. We might look at that tomorrow in a video, depending how this all goes. I don't want this video to be an hour long. But keep in mind, there's probably better builds out there than this. But hey, you want to see it? Let's do it. So, starting it off, I can pre-empower my Fire Breath. I'm going to precast Living Flame. And there's only one spell that's empowered. It is Fire Breath. So what's that? So we're going to go into a precast Living Flame. Right into a Fire Breath. There we go. Disintegrate. I'm going to pop my actual Dragon's Rage now, and I'm going to just cast Living Flames. I don't know why this is up here. I'm going to cast Living Flames into Disintegrates, Living Flame into Disintegrate. Now, you could maybe make a case for Azure Strikes into Disintegrates here to a certain extent, because Azure Strike is instant cast, which means more actual Essence Burst procs in your actual Dragon's Rage opener, but at the same time, Living Flame has traits that benefit it, and also it increases the duration of your dot from actual Fire Breath and things, so it's a weird middle ground, but I don't really know where it lands. So I'm just going with Living Flame for the most part. Fire Breathing on cooldown, there's that. Disintegrating here, keeping in mind once again our actual power spell uptime, as well as like not overlapping with capping at essences here. Disintegrating, Living Flaming, and this is most of the build. Like, Pyre can be cast in like AoE if there's multiple targets you want to cleave onto things for 2 essences versus 3. Like I said, I found, at least in my brief testing, that Disintegrate just feels like it's a better spell, like when it comes to single target. And even though, like the blue build, you have access to Disintegrate, the big thing is that the blue build takes much better advantage of it with Focusing Iris, with Scintillation, that gives like a big buff to spells that you cast after Disintegrate, which leads just a huge stacking amp and a lot more like single target impactful damage. Okay, so I'll say right now, keep in mind, because I'm a little surprised by the results from the actual Warcraft logs things here, that we did indeed shift from the actual like heavy AoE build of Fire, which had like Firestorm, Snapfire and things, ended up grabbing Tyranny and some more ranks and other more. We grabbed more like relevant single target traits for this build, because I said I didn't want to play the full AoE build. It's probably just too bad in single target. Well, I'm a little surprised. I've run it a few times actually, and number one, this dummy is a little weird. Like, this actual like Azure Blue iteration is a minute and a half. We came out at about 10k DPS roughly, but I hit it for like 4.5 minutes. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. There's a bit of something It's a little finicky there. About 10k roughly, give or take. Descending rate being 40% of our damage. Azure Strike 17, Charge Blast 16, Turn Charge 15, all that. The fire build actually came out at 10.5. But once again, keep in mind we're not actually playing like Firestorm and Snapfire and other more AoE based abilities. But I'm surprised it's actually even this high. Disintegrate being a massive 45% of our damage, Living Flame being 40, Fire Breath being 12, Fire being 1.88. I'm surprised, just like we had some pretty big Living Flame hits, the max crit being about 37k. I mean, I guess like we did end up going back towards Engulfing Blaze over Ruby Embers for like a single target build, and we didn't, you know, shift away from Firestorm and Snapfire, which makes a bit more sense. But even with like those traits not being taken, I'm surprised the Fire build put out this much damage, like in single target, just because of like how subpar it felt when I tested it earlier in the day and things. Now, once again, I am a little curious about that, you know, hybrid build of like blue and red. We might get to that soon enough. But like the big thing to take away from this is like when it comes to single target, if you're playing more of a single target based build for red Evoker, it can actually put out a bit more single target. I'm surprised that I thought it could. But if you're playing like the Firestorm, the Snapfire build, you're probably not really playing Engulfing Blaze. You're probably end up playing Ruby Embers for like the less cast time on it, which feeds into Everburning Flame and things a bit more. And when it comes to AoE, the Fire build needs packs to live a lot longer comparatively to the blue build to get that sustained, consistent like Fire Breath dot increased damage out onto each mob. If you're in a fast paced, like hectic, everything's dying fast setting, the Azure build does indeed seem to be a little better overall. Yeah, that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching, guys. Now, I know yesterday's video was a bit more talking about like just talent combinations and things, the different builds that are possible, and we really didn't go crazy in depth on like rotations and single target and AoE. And once again, I want to drive the point home that like I don't know the optimal rotations. I put more time to it today to try and figure it out, but I mean, it wasn't just me, it was from other people as well, help wise. But I feel like we're getting closer, but these rotations could very, very well not be optimal. These builds might not be optimal, but I wanted to showcase both the red build and the blue build in single target and AoE today, and really just sort of go with, just show where they're good, where they're bad, how they vary, how they're similar. Let's go from there. Now, there is like this weird like hybrid red and blue build, which I sort of want to make a video on my in the next day or so if it ends up working out and actually like it a good bit. So we'll give it a shot. We'll see where it goes, and yeah, hopefully it ends up actually being something that's, you know, worth it and a little interesting. So if you guys want to see that and or more Evoker or just like Warlock / WoW content, be sure to hit the like and sub buttons while you're down in the comment section telling me your favorite build Evoker from this video. That was a good segue. I like it. But yeah, any questions or anything like that, feel free to drop them down there as well, and I will indeed be sure to get back to you. Hope you guys have been enjoying the Evoker content. Hopefully Warlock trees come out soon as well. We're sort of in a holding pattern for that, but when they do, I'm still playing Warlock. Don't worry, just yeah, so we'll see where that goes. But thanks again for watching, guys. I want to give one huge shout out to my patrons as well before we end the video. Thank you guys a million times for all support on Patreon. Really truly do appreciate it. If you're looking at supporting on Patreon, there should be a link up here as well as down in the video description below. It's day 2 of Shadowlands, good lord, of Dragonflight Alpha. It's 6 in the morning. I'm a little scatterbrained, I'm sorry, but I've been having a really good time. Dragonflight feels like easily the most polished alpha beta that I've ever played in, as far as the, like week 1 release goes. And if things follow suit with how this first week is gone, I think that December release date is easily achievable. So we'll see. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm gonna catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.